The HFY Dominion had long considered themselves the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy. Their scientists traveled from one dead world to another, studying the remains of extinct species, always searching for knowledge that might reinforce their superiority. When their latest expedition landed on a forgotten planet, they expected nothing more than ruins from another failed civilization. The alien archaeologists laughed as they walked through the massive structures, their sleek, advanced suits gliding over the dust-covered ground. The towering buildings, though still standing, looked crude to them, simple, functional, and lacking any artistic elegance. To them, it was clear that whatever species had built this city had been primitive, unworthy of remembrance. "Look at this work!" one of the scientists scoffed, tapping his metallic claws against a stone-like pillar. No intricate designs, no grand architecture, just basic, mindless construction. This species never made it far. The others chuckled, recording their findings with no real interest. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, their scanners picked up no signs of energy. The city was dead, long abandoned, with no traces of life. The HFY saw this as further proof of the species' failure. If they had been truly advanced, they would have left behind technology worth salvaging. Yet all they found were massive, empty structures, silent and lifeless. Their leader, Professor Xintor, barely paid attention as his team reported their findings. He was already bored. This expedition was turning out to be as disappointing as the others. However, as they mapped the city, a peculiar detail emerged. Several enormous chambers were completely sealed, their interiors hidden even from the most advanced scanning equipment. One such chamber stood at the heart of the city, surrounded by a thick, metallic barrier, unlike anything they had seen before. "Why seal something so tightly?" one scientist murmured, running his scanners over the surface. There were no visible openings, no seams to suggest it had been built in parts. It was as if the structure had been grown rather than constructed. That, at least, was curious. Xintor dismissed the thought with a wave of his hand. Probably a primitive storage facility. Nothing of importance. But some of the younger researchers remained intrigued. They had seen ruins before, countless civilizations reduced to dust, but this place felt different. It was too well preserved, too untouched by time. The air itself had a strange quality to it, as if something unseen lingered in the shadows. Yet, the HFY were creatures of logic, not superstition, and they ignored the uneasy feeling growing in their chests. One scientist, Yelvok, hesitated as his scanner flickered strangely. He tapped the device, trying to reset it, but no matter what he did, the readings remained erratic. "Professor, I'm detecting residual energy pulses," he finally reported. "They're faint, but it's like something is still operational beneath the surface." Xintor laughed. "Residual energy? After all this time? Nonsense. If there was any power left in this place, it would have shown on our primary scans." He turned away, uninterested. Yelvok frowned but said nothing more. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had overlooked something critical. Determined to uncover the truth, a few of the scientists decided to force their way into the sealed chamber. They activated their cutting tools, expecting the process to be simple. But the moment their beams touched the surface, something happened. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a deep, mechanical hum filled the air. At first, the HFY thought it was a coincidence, perhaps a natural seismic shift. Then, one by one, the city's long-dead lights flickered to life. Dim at first, then growing stronger, illuminating the streets with a cold, artificial glow. The researchers froze, their laughter replaced by stunned silence. The city wasn't dead. It had been asleep. Panic set in as their instruments went haywire. Strange symbols flashed across their displays, messages in an unknown language, yet somehow the meaning became clear. Unauthorized access detected. Defense systems online. The aliens turned to run, but the chamber they had tried to open responded before they could escape. With a thunderous groan, the once sealed doors slid open, revealing a massive, dark interior. From within, an army of humanoid figures began to stir. Their bodies, metallic yet unnervingly organic, moved with precision as they stepped forward, glowing red eyes scanning the intruders. The HFY had miscalculated. These were not ruins. This was not the graveyard of a failed species. It was something far worse. It was a fortress. And it was waking up. The city was no longer silent. The moment the sealed chamber had been disturbed, the ruins had come to life, as if they had been waiting for this very moment. The HFY scientists stood frozen, their arrogance replaced with fear as the ancient machines flickered back into existence. Lights surged through the streets in a slow, deliberate pattern, illuminating paths that had been dark for centuries. The air, once stale and dead, now hummed with a strange energy that made their skin crawl. It was as if the city itself was waking up. Their leader, Professor Exentor, struggled to regain control of the situation. "Do not panic," he barked, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. "This is simply an automated system reacting to our presence. We are scientists, not scavengers. There is nothing to fear." But deep down, he knew this was no ordinary response. The buildings were pulsing with an energy unlike anything they had encountered before. This was not a simple power grid rebooting. Something else was happening. One of the younger researchers, Yelvok, studied his scanner with growing dread. The device, which had been struggling to get a proper reading before, was now filled with a constant stream of unknown data. The energy signatures he was picking up were not just residual power. There was intelligence behind them, something deliberate, something watching. He hesitated before speaking. "Professor, this is not random. The energy patterns are structured, as if they're reacting to us directly." His words sent a ripple of unease through the group, but Zinda refused to acknowledge the fear growing among his team. He turned away and marched toward the chamber they had tried to breach. He refused to believe that this dead city held any real danger. It was nothing more than an old system activating due to their presence. But as he neared the massive doors, something unexpected happened. The symbols that had flashed randomly across their scanners before now began to appear in a structured sequence, forming messages in a language that was not their own, yet somehow they understood it. "You should not be here." The words sent a chill through the team. It was not a pre-recorded message. It was something responding to them, warning them. One of the scientists stepped back, his breathing heavy. "Professor, we need to leave." But Exender refused to back down. He gestured toward the chamber, trying to keep his voice steady. "We are here to study, not to run from shadows. This is an opportunity to learn." He turned to Yelvok. "Translate the messages. Find out what this system is." But before Yelvok could even attempt to process the symbols, the ground beneath them trembled. The long dead metal structures groaned, shifting slightly as if something massive was buried beneath their feet. The scientist holding the scanner flinched as another message appeared. "Leave now, before it wakes." This time, the voice was not just on their scanners. It vibrated through the walls, through the air itself, deep and ancient. The realization hit them all at once. This was not a simple security system. This was something older, something aware, and it was not happy with their presence. The scientists turned to run, but before they could move, the sealed chamber finally opened. The heavy doors slid apart with a deep, mechanical groan, revealing darkness beyond. And then they saw it. At first, it was nothing more than a shape tall, unmoving, standing in the center of the vast chamber. Its surface was sleek, metallic, yet strangely organic, as if it had been crafted rather than built. The HFY had seen war machines before, had studied ancient weapons left behind by fallen civilizations, but this was different. This was not rusted or broken. This had not been abandoned. This had been waiting. And then the final message appeared. "It is too late." A deafening noise filled the chamber as the figure in the darkness moved. Its eyes, two burning red lights, snapped open, locking onto the intruders. The HFY felt an overwhelming presence pushing against their minds, not words, but raw intent. They were trespassers, invaders, and whatever had been sleeping here was now awake. The alien scientists turned and ran, their pride shattered, their arrogance replaced with terror. As they fled through the ruins, the lights around them pulsed in warning, the city itself shifting, changing, as if guiding them toward an escape. But they knew, deep down, that they had made a mistake far greater than they could ever comprehend. They had mocked these ruins. They had called the builders primitive. But now, they understood the truth. This was no abandoned world. This was a fortress. And its masters were not gone. They were simply waiting. For centuries, the planet had been nothing more than a lifeless rock, its towering cities reduced to silent ruins, its streets buried under layers of dust and time. No records of its builders remained, no signs of their culture or history, only the cold, crumbling remains of what had once been a civilization. The galaxy had long forgotten about this place, dismissing it as yet another relic of a failed species. But when an expedition of alien scientists from the HFY Dominion landed on its surface, they did so with the arrogance of those who believed themselves superior. They wandered through the ruins, scanning the dead city with their advanced instruments, mocking the crude structures and primitive designs. To them, this was nothing more than a graveyard of a race too weak to survive. Professor Exintor led the expedition, his voice filled with amusement as he observed the ruins. Another lost civilization. Another failed experiment of nature, he said, waving a hand dismissively. No technology worth salvaging, no knowledge worth studying. His team laughed, their voices echoing through the empty streets. They moved through the city with little caution, stepping over ancient walkways, entering abandoned buildings, and carelessly disturbing the remains of a world long gone. The HFY had studied countless dead civilizations before, and this was no different. Or so they thought. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, something strange began to happen. Their scanners, which had previously detected nothing but stone and metal, started picking up faint energy readings. It was subtle at first, a weak pulse that barely registered on their devices. But the further they went, the stronger it became. Professor, one of the scientists, Yelvok, hesitated. I'm detecting an energy source beneath us. It's faint, but it's there. Sinter frowned, unimpressed. Residual power from a forgotten generator, perhaps. Nothing unusual. But Yelvok wasn't convinced. He adjusted his scanner, trying to pinpoint the source, and as he did, a strange message flickered across his screen, a series of symbols, foreign yet somehow familiar. Before he could speak, the ground beneath them trembled. At first, it was just a subtle vibration, like a distant tremor. But then, without warning, the ruins around them flickered to life. The ancient streetlights, long thought dead, flickered weakly before growing brighter, casting an eerie glow over the city. Buildings that had stood in darkness for millennia were now illuminated once more, their interiors glowing with a cold, artificial light. The HFY stood frozen, their earlier amusement replaced by unease. This shouldn't be possible, one of them whispered. Nothing should still be operational. But it was. Then came the sound, a deep, mechanical hum that resonated through the streets, vibrating through the very air. It was as if the city itself was waking up, stretching after a long slumber. The scientists exchanged nervous glances, their advanced minds struggling to process what they were seeing. This was no mere accident, no simple malfunction of ancient machinery. Something had reactivated. Something had noticed them. And then the final proof arrived. The towering buildings around them, once empty and hollow, began to shift. Massive doors, sealed for ages, groaned open. The streets, covered in layers of dust, shook as unseen mechanisms deep beneath the surface rumbled to life. The scientists watched in horror as massive figures emerged from the darkness, tall, metallic beings with glowing eyes, their forms sleek yet impossibly strong. These were no simple machines. They were sentinels, guardians. And they had been waiting. A message appeared on every HFY scanner at once, written in that same strange language. But this time, they all understood its meaning. You were warned. Sinter stumbled back, his mind racing. This isn't possible. This civilization was extinct. But as the sentinels turned their gaze upon the intruders, raising weapons that pulsed with unknown energy, the truth became clear. The civilization had never died. It had only been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now, the lights had returned. The city was alive once more. And it was not happy. The planet of X-Cipher-9 had been abandoned for millennia, its towering structures covered in layers of dust and decay. Once, it had been a thriving world, but now it was nothing more than a silent graveyard of a lost civilization. Many had speculated about its downfall. Some believed it was destroyed by war. Others thought its people had fled. But no one truly knew what had happened. The galaxy had moved on, leaving X-Cipher-9 as just another forgotten world. That was until the Exilvara, an ambitious alien species, arrived to claim whatever secrets lay buried beneath its ruins. They were explorers, scavengers of knowledge, and they believed they were superior to any ancient race that had once walked these streets. Leading the expedition was Professor Exentor, a seasoned scientist with little regard for the past. He and his team of researchers moved through the ruins, scanning the buildings, documenting the remains. The structures were massive, built with precision and intelligence far beyond what they had expected. Impressive, Exentor admitted, running a clawed hand along a towering metal pillar. But ultimately useless. The builders of this place were strong, but they still perished. His team nodded, their scanners picking up faint traces of energy, but nothing significant. The city was dead, or so they thought. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, they came across a massive structure, unlike anything they had seen before. Its entrance was sealed by an enormous metallic door, covered in strange symbols that pulsed faintly, as if trying to communicate. Yelvok, the youngest researcher, hesitated before speaking. "Professor, these symbols. They seem to be warnings." Zinter scoffed. "Warnings from a civilization that no longer exists? I think we can handle it." He gestured for the team to proceed, and without hesitation, they began their work, using their advanced tools to break the ancient seal. The moment the seal cracked open, everything changed. A deep vibration resonated through the ruins, a sound that came not from machinery, but from something far older. The ground trembled as hidden mechanisms beneath the city roared back to life. The silent buildings around them flickered, their long-dead systems reigniting, and then, from within the massive structure, a bright golden light erupted. The scientists shielded their eyes as the enormous doors groaned open, revealing a vast chamber filled with towering figures, statues, or at least that's what they appeared to be at first. They stood in perfect formation, unmoving, their armored forms covered in dust and time. Then, one of them moved. The sound was unnatural, like metal grinding against itself, but there was something fluid about the way it stepped forward, its massive frame unhindered by age. Its eyes, once dark, burned with an eerie golden glow. And then, as if responding to an unseen command, the others began to awaken as well. One by one, the ancient figures stepped forward, shaking off centuries of stillness. The Exilvara scientists froze, their arrogance shattered in an instant. "Professor, these aren't statues," Yelvok whispered in horror. "They're alive." A voice echoed through the chamber, not spoken through words, but through something deeper, something that resonated in their very bones. "Intruders. Violators of the sacred seal." The figures advanced, their movements precise, their glowing eyes locked onto the trespassers. Zinter stepped back, his mind racing. "We mean no harm," he called out, his voice shaking. "We are explorers, scientists." But the Guardians were unmoved. This world was sealed. You were warned. The realization hit them like a storm. This civilization had not fallen. It had not vanished. It had prepared. It had built these Guardians, these Sentinels, to protect whatever lay hidden within this city. And now they had been awakened. The Exilvara turned to run, but the ruins themselves seemed to shift, sealing off their exit. The buildings, once dormant, were now alive, as if responding to the will of the Guardians. There was no escape. The lead Guardian raised a massive weapon, and the chamber filled with blinding golden light. Outside, the city pulsed once more, then fell silent. The ruins remained as they had for centuries, untouched, undisturbed. And deep within the chamber, The Guardians returned to their eternal watch, waiting for the next intruders foolish enough to break the seal. The ruins of HFY 9 stood in eerie silence, their towering structures casting long shadows over the barren landscape. Once, this world had thrived, its people achieving wonders beyond imagination. But now, all that remained were empty streets, broken towers, and the whispers of a forgotten past. The galaxy had long dismissed it as just another dead world, an abandoned relic of a civilization that had faded into history. But for the HFY Dominion, this was more than just ruins. It was a mystery waiting to be uncovered, a chance to claim whatever secrets still lay buried beneath the dust. Leading the expedition was Professor Exentor, a scientist renowned for his cold, calculating mind. He had spent decades studying ancient civilizations, always searching for knowledge, for power. To him, HFY 9 was no different from the hundreds of dead planets he had visited before. The team moved carefully through the streets, their scanners sweeping the ruins for any traces of advanced technology. The air was thick with dust, the remnants of a world that had been lifeless for millennia. "Another lost species," Sinner muttered, tapping a clawed finger against a rusted metallic pillar. "Impressive structures, but ultimately, they failed." His team nodded in agreement, their expressions neutral. They were not here to admire history. They were here to strip it for whatever was useful. As they ventured deeper, the ruins became stranger. The buildings, once thought to be simple constructs, had an unnatural symmetry to them, as if they had been designed with something beyond mere architecture in mind. Their scanners picked up strange energy readings, faint but consistent, as if the city itself was not entirely dead. Then they found it a massive structure, sealed behind a colossal gate covered in glowing symbols. The markings were unlike anything they had ever seen, pulsating faintly as if trying to warn them. Yelvok, the youngest scientist on the team, hesitated. "Professor, these symbols, they seem like a warning." Zinter scoffed, unimpressed. "Warnings from a species that no longer exists?" He gestured for the team to begin their work. "Break the seal. We have no time for superstition." The moment the ancient door was disturbed, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep, resonating hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The lights of the city, long thought dead, flickered to life, casting an unnatural glow over the ruins. The researchers exchanged uneasy glances as the massive doors groaned open, revealing a vast chamber hidden beneath the surface. Inside stood massive figures tall, imposing, their bodies covered in metallic armor that gleamed under the dim light. At first, they seemed like statues, remnants of a bygone era. But then, one of them moved. The grinding of metal against metal sent a shiver through the team. Slowly, the figures stirred, their golden eyes burning to life as they stepped forward in perfect synchronization. Yelvok's breath caught in his throat. "Professor, these aren't statues. They're alive." Centaur's confidence faltered for the first time. The air around them grew heavy, as if the very city was waking up. Then came the voice, not spoken, but felt, deep in their bones. "Intruders, you have violated the sacred seal." The words sent a wave of dread through the team. The Guardians turned their glowing eyes upon them, their movements precise, their presence overwhelming. The realization struck them all at once: this civilization had never perished. It had prepared. It had built these beings to protect something. And now they had been awakened. Zinter took a cautious step back. "We mean no harm," he called out, his voice shaking. "We are explorers. Scientists." But the Guardians remained unmoved. This place was sealed. "You were warned." The words echoed through the chamber as the massive beings raised their weapons, energy pulsing within their metallic frames. The researchers turned to flee, but the ruins themselves seemed to shift, blocking every exit, trapping them within the ancient city's grasp. The buildings, once dormant, were now alive, responding to the will of their guardians. There was no escape. The lead guardian raised its arm, and a blinding golden light filled the chamber. Outside, the ruins of HFY 9 remained as they had for millennia, untouched and undisturbed. The city's lights flickered one last time before fading into darkness once more. The ancient guardians stood in silence, returning to their eternal watch. And deep beneath the ruins, the warning remained, waiting for the next intruders foolish enough to ignore it. The cold expanse of space stretched endlessly before the research vessel Velmara, its metallic hull gleaming under the distant light of a dying star. Inside, the crew worked in tense silence, their focus locked on the planet below, a desolate world marked only by ancient ruins and long-forgotten secrets. Commander Rylos stood at the observation deck, his eyes narrowed as he studied the surface through the ship's scanners. The data coming in made no sense. The planet had been recorded as lifeless for centuries, yet strange signals pulsed beneath its surface, faint but undeniable. Something was still alive down there. Something hidden. Dr. Liera, the lead scientist, adjusted the holographic display in front of her. "The signals are increasing in frequency," she said, her voice laced with both excitement and unease. "It's almost as if it knows we're watching." The thought sent a chill through the room. The Velmara had come in search of artifacts, remnants of a civilization long dead, but now it seemed that the past was not as silent as they had believed. Rylos turned to the crew. "Prepare the drop team. We're going down." The shuttle descended through thick, dust-filled air, landing amidst towering structures that had resisted the passage of time. The ruins were massive, their design intricate beyond anything the explorers had ever seen. Symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly as if they still held a hidden power. As the team stepped onto the surface, a strange sensation settled over them, an overwhelming feeling of being watched. The deeper they moved into the ruins, the stronger it became. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind through the hollowed remains of the city. Then they found it a vast underground chamber sealed behind an enormous metallic door. Its surface was covered in carvings, depicting a story lost to history. Dr. Liera traced her fingers over the symbols, eyes widening as the meaning became clear. "This isn't just a tomb," she whispered. "It's a warning." But before she could speak further, the ground trembled beneath them. The ancient mechanisms, undisturbed for eons, roared back to life. The great door groaned open, revealing a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow the very light around it. And then the voice came. "You were not meant to be here." It wasn't spoken aloud, yet every member of the team heard it, felt it resonate through their bones. From within the chamber, shadows moved, taking shape, solidifying into towering figures. Their eyes glowed like embers in the darkness, their forms both ancient and impossibly advanced. They were not just statues, not relics of the past, they were alive. The guardians of this world, the last remnants of a civilization that had not fallen, but had chosen to remain hidden. Rylos stepped back, his heart pounding. What are you?" The tallest of the figures regarded him with an expression unreadable, neither hostile nor welcoming. "We are the last. The keepers of the truth." The guardians moved forward, and as they did, the walls of the chamber shimmered, revealing images, holographic echoes of the past. The truth unfolded before their eyes. The civilization that had once thrived here had not been destroyed by war or disaster. They had seen the fate of the galaxy, had witnessed the endless cycles of conflict and greed that consumed other worlds. And so, they had made a choice. They had hidden themselves away, sealing their knowledge, their power, so that it would not fall into the hands of those who would use it for destruction. The Guardians were created as their last defense, eternal sentinels to ensure that no one disturbed what should remain buried. Dr. Liera's voice was barely a whisper. They didn't vanish, they locked themselves away. The realization sent a shiver through the team. This planet was not a ruin. It was a vault, and they had just broken the seal. The Guardians regarded them in silence for a long moment before speaking again. "You were not meant to know. Leave before it is too late." The team exchanged uneasy glances. The truth had been revealed, but at what cost? The knowledge they had uncovered was beyond anything they had imagined. But some secrets were not meant to be disturbed. Without another word, Rylos signaled the retreat. They left the chamber, the Guardians watching as the ancient doors sealed once more behind them. As the Velmara ascended back into the cold void of space, Rylos stared at the planet below. They had come seeking answers, but all they had found was a truth too dangerous to share. Some mysteries were meant to stay buried, and some warnings were meant to be heeded.